Hi, welcome back. In this topic now we will be looking at two other topics, parameterized mappings and lookups. So we will get started first with parameterized mapping. Let's look at our file-to-file scenario, the mapping for our file-to-file scenario. Okay, here we go. This is the mapping for our file-to-file scenario. I'll pop this out as always. I popped it out. And in this, let's go ahead and execute our mapping, right? Okay, and I've executed my mapping and everything seems to be working fine, right? Now my business comes to me today and says, hey, when you're doing the concatenation of the first name and the last name, can you concatenate it with a comma, right? All right, you say no problem. I go to my mapping and do a comma here and I say this is done, right? You save your mapping, you activate your mapping, and sorry, where's activate? Yeah, I've activated my mapping, and you tell the business that the changes are done. You test your mapping as well by executing it here, and once I've executed, I test my mapping. Yes, the mapping is now changed to it is delimited with a comma. Sounds good. So now you transport this mapping to QA and to production and you go live. One day after you go live, your business comes back to you and say, oops, that was a mistake on my end. Can you change this from a comma to a hash? You will say, the typical answer in typical organizations would be, yes, of course, I can make this change, but this change will get deployed into production now only in the next change window, which in any organization could be every week, a month, you do not know. And your business is going to flip saying, but this is a simple change, why can it not be done? So the idea is there a way, the message that I'm leading towards is there a way where you can make this configurable, where I can pass parameters to my mapping that are configurable, so that if there is a change tomorrow, I do not need to make a change to my mapping, but I do the change in my integration directory. Something similar to what we saw as a fixed value and a value mapping, but now for parameters within your mapping. Is that something that we can do? The answer is yes, you can, and that is where parameterized mappings come into picture. How do we define a parameterized mapping, right? Go into the first, open up your message mapping. Now we are still in our file-to-file mapping. I'm going to go into my signature tab, and within my signature tab, at the bottom, you will see something called parameters. Let's go ahead and create a parameter. I'll create this parameter called concat delimiter, right? And I'm going to call it as a type, simple type, excuse me. The type is XSD string, and it can be an input or an export parameter. Let's for now, we'll only focus on the import parameters. So I've done that and I'm saving my mapping. Now I go back to the definition of my mapping, right? I double click on the concat and now I see a new option here, input help for delimiter string. I select that. It says, hey, select parameter. Let's expand this. You see select parameters and it's asking you which parameter, and I say concat delimiter. Perfect. And now if you see, the delimiter string is a concat delimiter string that it's going to happen. All right, so let's go ahead. I've done my save. So let's go ahead and execute the mapping, you think. And what happens? It says no value assigned to parameter. Parameter is therefore given an initial value. Why did that happen? So when I'm testing here, how do I assign a parameter? Do you see this tab called parameters? So far we've only focused on this tab document. Click on this tab called parameters, and when you click on this tab, you will see the import parameters here. So let's go ahead and say hash out here and execute. And now you see it becomes John hashdo, Jane hashdo. Perfect. So first step is done. We've defined in our message mapping, in our signature, we've defined a parameter. We've gone to our concat statement and we've also used the parameter there. Similarly, let's do one more thing. Let's also say date format, right? And I'm going to call it a simple type. It's again XSD integer. Okay, now I'll go into my definition, and for my date of birth, in my date transformation, I know the input is always going to be the same, but for the output, I'll just copy this and put it here in my notepad, and I'm going to say in my selection help, I'm going to say use date format. It should be visible somewhere here. Okay. So looks like the date format does not support it. I will get back to you on that. So I was hoping to be able to do that for the date format as well, to use a parameterized mapping for date transformation, but looks like, so let's do one thing. I'll just try a workaround and I see if that works. I'll say dollar, let's look at the parameter, cancel this. Okay, the default is here. Let's come back to that. Let's the date format be the same. We'll just focus on the delimiter for this, right? Or rather, let's just give it a quick shot. It could be a workaround that is needed. So I'm going to call it as concat this, okay? And here in my date transformation, I'm going to go here and just put a dollar and call it as date delimiter, and let's see if this works. Okay, I'm now going here. I'm going to my parameters. My concat delimiter is this. Okay, it is called date format, so no worries. We'll change that. And it says this is of type YYMMDD, right? And I come back. It's called date format, right? Okay. So I go to my definition. I double click. And I call it date format. I say OK. I save. I go to my test tab. Again, I will need to go to the parameters and enter that. And I'll enter my date format and I'm going to execute it. I'm not sure if this works. Okay, it doesn't work. PI doesn't support it, unfortunately. So basically looks like the parameterized mapping is only supported for a few functions. It is not supported for a date transformation. This could be probably available in the newer releases. So for now, I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'll just leave it at that and I'll save it. Okay. So let's go to the signature and remove the date format as well. So now we have the concat delimiter which we have defined. Okay. And let's execute this one more time to make sure we haven't broken anything in that process. Okay. So concat delimiter, I will say hash. I'll execute. Okay, and I'll expand. Okay, it's a hash. Perfect. Now the next step is, now that we made a mapping change, we need to now make a change in our operation mapping. So let's go into our operation mapping. Okay, let's again pop the operation mapping out. Go into edit mode of your operation mapping and go into the parameters tab of your operation mapping. Let's define again a delimiter here, and we are going to call it concat delimiter. The name can be anything that we want, and it is again simple type XSD string import. Then you need to click on this binding tab, and when you click on the binding tab, it's going to ask what is the equivalent binding, right? I'm going to go in here and select the binding as the same concat delimiter. So I've done the binding, and now that I've done the binding, I'm saving my operation mapping, and I'm going to my change list and I'm activating my two changes, the change to my message mapping and the change to my operation mapping. Now once I've done that, I'm going to go to my file-to-file scenario. My file-to-file scenario is here. I'm going to go into my interface determination, and when I go into my interface determination, it automatically detects that hey, this mapping now has a concat delimiter. I go here, it asks me for a type, it is of type XSD string, and I'm going to say hash. Okay, and save this. And now let's say activate it, and when I activate it, I'm done. Right, now let's go ahead and upload my file. I'm going to change this. I'm going to cg3y, file to file, and okay, here there's a mistake. I import. The file has been written. Let me open my sender channel from communication channel monitoring. Okay, I go to communication channel monitor. I say go, I say stop, I say start. Okay, now my file should have been picked up. So I go to SXMB Moni, I refresh, and let's look at the output that has come. Technical routing, payloads, and excellent, it's done. Okay, now let's look at the mapping one more time. Let's try what other options we have. right? So this is actually a bug out here. The reason we could not see a date function was because there's a bug. So if I go into the interface determination, right? If I go into the interface determination and try to see a concat delimiter, you see you have multiple more choices. You have XSD date, you have XSD time, and so on. Whereas here, you do not have that option of XSD date and format. So this is a bug in the current release of PI, the server that we are on. For the subsequent releases, SAP has provided a patch that you can apply the patch, and then you'd be able to see XSD date here. And once you see the XSD date here, you should then be able to do the parameterized mapping for the date function as well, right? Because it expects a date function, and that's why it did not enable us to do that. All right, so let's close this. Now let's look at file-to-file ICO00, right? How do we do parameterized mapping for integrated configurations, right? So let's go into the message mapping. I'm into file-to-file for integrated configuration. Again, I'm going to my concat function. I'm going to my signature functions. I'm going to call it as concat delimiter, and I'm going to call it for now concat delimiter underscore okay? So I'm going to call it concat delimiter. Let me pop it out. For some reason it doesn't show it. I'm not able to pull it. Okay, so concat delimiter XSD type string, import, perfect, save. Now I go into my definition of my message mapping. I double click here. I select this same thing that we did before, concat delimiter you can see it as concat delimiter save and save. All right, now that that is done, let's go ahead into the operation mapping. The same way that we did for the operation mapping previously, I go into the parameters tab. I call this now concat delim underscore operation mapping. Again, category is simple, type is integer. I save my operation mapping, and now I need to do the binding, right? So it's asking what is the, for concat delimiter for the message mapping, what is the corresponding parameter. I select the operation mapping parameter, I say OK, I save, and I'm done. So let's go ahead, activate the two changes, and once I've activated the changes, I am done with this. So now I'm going to go ahead to my integrated configuration. And where's my integrated configuration? File-to-file ICO00. Now in my integrated configuration, go to the receivers interfaces, and you see it automatically tells you that, hey, what value do I provide here? All right. So I provided it as hash at both the places. I'm just going ahead and activating my change. And now I'm going to go ahead to upload my file. So I'm going to go upload my file-to-file ICO and file-to-file ICO, and my file is written. And now I'm going to go to PI monitoring. I'm going to open my sender channel rather. So I'm going to go into my inbound processing tab, get the name of my sender channel, and here out here I'm going to select this and saying execute. I'm going to stop. I'm going, oh, okay, the message is processed already. Awesome. I'm going to go to my monitoring. I'm going to go to message monitor, and I'm going to go database. Okay, so my file system message was got executed successfully, or was it executed? Let's go ahead and stop the channel one more time. Start the channel one more time and refresh. Okay. Now let's go into file-to-file ICO here, into my directory. All right, I'll refresh. Okay, there's a new file here, and if you see, it's perfectly John #do. All right, so with this we have executed parameterized mappings where I've been able to successfully pass parameters from the integration directory to my message mapping, and we've done it for both classical configuration and for integrated configuration. In the next session, we will be looking at RFC lookups. How do we perform lookups in conjunction with parameterized mapping? I shall see you soon.